Hi, my name is Alexandra, and today I'll be refuting against my opponent's proposition, marijuana usage benefits individuals. Today I'll be going over his secondary claims. Number one, marijuana has effectively controlled chronic pain for Americans. Number two, marijuana controls symptoms for terminal illnesses. And number three, marijuana improves appetite in different strains of cannabis. First of all, I'll be going over his first claim, which was marijuana has effectively controlled chronic pains for Americans. So my opponent gives evidence about saying that this physician thought that medical marijuana would be beneficial to chronic pain. But in reality, he does not mention about chronic pain at all. He mentions about chronic illnesses, for example, depression and anxiety. That is not chronic pain at all. So therefore, I found the reasoning that chronic pain is when the body has a tissue damage or structural problem. For example, the benefits of cannabis doesn't even control chronic pain at all. There's a pill called opium, and that actually helps it because it reduces inflammation and damages, which is more beneficial than cannabis because there's no statistical information that actually does do that. The next information I'll be talking about is the second claim, which is marijuana controls symptoms of terminal illnesses. My opponent gives evidence about a case study from Peter Gribson from Harvard University that CBD strains relieve symptoms in comparison to THC, that taking off high off the drug will produce beneficial for people who have child epilepsy. For example, my opponent gets his source from a blog. First of all, we're doing a claim of facts speech, so therefore you need to get primary sources. For example, a blog is not a primary source because it's not professionally published. So therefore, Peter Gribson didn't get any authorization from other scientists saying, yes, I agree with this information, yes, it's statistically proven and scientifically proven that this is true, that cannabis does do that for these people with child epilepsy. Therefore, I found information that cannabis does not help people with child epilepsy. For example, I found an individual, she was about 3 years old that had child epilepsy. She went through drugs, it did not work. She ended up getting addicted to it. So her mother ended up finding a natural remedy, which was actually garlic. If you get injured in sports or anything, garlic is a beneficial way to reduce anti-inflammatory, and it also helps your brain send signals to your body part to where you have that illness or that pain at. For example, my opponent also mentions that he uses a source from CNN cable news about this girl named Charlotte Figgs. She was 3 months old when her parents realized she had seizures, and she was keeping heart attacks all until she was about 13 years old. Her parents ended up doing like different drugs, and they thought that medical marijuana would be beneficial because they know that medical marijuana actually soothes the pain for other people. But in reality, my opponent didn't really read through the source because this family had a long struggle because they were looking after, they thought medical marijuana would be beneficial, but in reality, no doctor wanted to sign off because for a child, in order to take marijuana, it would actually hurt them in the long run. It will give them a heart attack, she had a heart attack, so why would you want to have your daughter be in a heart attack in the first place? And number two, medical marijuana will ended up messing up her brain because it's slowing down functions, and she won't satisfy from this drug. I found a counterclaim that children in the long run children who ended up using, like teens who use marijuana, end up having a slower brain. They have slower brain function, and their body ends up slowing down, which will give them a higher chance of getting a disorder when they're getting older in age. Now I'll be going to my last claim about how marijuana improves appetites in different strains of cannabis. Overall, my opponent talks about different strains of cannabis. Strains means when you overdo a great effort of something. For example, when you strained your knee, that means you overdid it. So why would you talking about the negative effects of cannabis? For example, my opponent mentions that people who have depression and anxiety use marijuana, but when I looked up data, it shows that people who are depressed and have anxiety have low self-esteem, and that's what marijuana does to you at a certain amount of time when you're taking it. And the last two evidence that my opponent gives are not beneficial to his claim, because he mentions about the flavors of marijuana and flavors of tobacco, which does not even support what he's actually talking about in this whole speech that he mentioned to us. And number two, the reason when you take marijuana, it doesn't even improve your appetite. It actually messes up your brain, and it mimics a system for you to always be hungry. So they actually don't know an off switch in order to undo what marijuana does to you. So once you take marijuana, your brain is getting adapted to that situation, and there's no promoter in order to, like, okay, because it did that, there's no off switch. So therefore, your body would always be hungry, and we don't know, there's no scientific proof how long you'll be like that. So that's why people who take an over amount of marijuana end up having those side effects for a very long amount. And last but not least, thank you for taking your time and listening to my speech.
Thank you, Alexandra. Those of you that came in late in the room, or those of you that didn't catch it, I think it's rude when you have phones out, put them away. I thought I made it clear to start with, so please make sure that that's super duper clear. Can I have your outline back, please? Thanks. Those of you that just came in, if you have outlines to give me, I'm your sub today. You're going to want to give me those so they get in rotation. Kevin, you're up next on the list. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Chit-chatting. Are you good?
Yes, it's blinking.
Blinking still means it's recording, so if you press the square button inside the square, it'll tell you that it processed. Alexandra, did it tell you it was processing?
Yeah, I pressed it and then I don't know what happened.
Okay, so if you
Yeah, I
press
kept
the
pressing
square.
it because I didn't see it.